Hi. Um, so the term experience design is really about 15 years old, but hasn't really been widely used until about maybe the last 3 years. Um, you know, there are a lot of differences in how different agencies, different groups are using the term, and really best practices haven't been established. So I want to talk a little bit about, or first, about how we think about a method, how we define it, and then actually get into some detailed examples of how we do this work with sort of a large and then a smaller organization. He mentioned McDonald's. I think it's interesting because we've actually gotten to do pretty full experience design work with them over many years, and it speaks to some of the challenges of doing this work with large organizations. I'm going to use this thing as a remote, which probably means it's not going to work right, so bear with me, but we'll give it a shot. So again, my name is David Lipkin. I'm one of the founders of Method. I've been doing design work about 25 years now. We've been in business long enough, 18, 19 years, something like that. We were acquired about 5 years ago by a large software development company called Global Logic. So a lot of our work these days really runs the gamut from upfront strategy and sort of core design work all the way through to fairly detailed development, embedded software, rigorous sort of back-end systems. So a lot of our work here is collaboration between business, design, and engineering. So we've seen changes in the world in the last few years. Certainly, customers come to us for the same things they've always come to us for: help with differentiation, speed to market, engaging with their customers. I think that's sort of not surprising, but as we all know, customer expectations have changed, technology is making things move faster, business cycles are moving faster, right? Our response to all this is experience design, so I want to unpack that a little bit. Let's talk about experience. So we're always taking in data. We see. This is it, not working. We hear. We taste. We smell. I can always taste and smell the lemon when I see it. Hopefully not the garbage. We feel. We measure time. We measure space. We know when our bodies are in motion. And we know when they're at rest. We cannot not experience. We take it all in nonstop, all day, every day. We aren't even aware of all the information we take in, nor conscious of what we do with it all. We are aware of our emotions, and emotions influence how experiences form memory, and memory is intrinsic to how we think. Every day we wake up with a sense of self and identity maintained by our memory of who we are and what matters to us, and all of this is based on what's happened to us before. Who we are is shaped by what happens to us over time. So, experience equals what happens over time. This is when I get into math. Let's talk about design. So design is a verb and a noun. It is also a process and an outcome. So imagine to form a mental picture or image of a chair. Design is a method of imagining what could be, plus the detail to bring it to life. And the balance of requirements, opportunities, and constraints determines the utility, quality, and desirability of the final product. And design is a reflection of the cultures that produce it. It can be timeless. It can be rooted in the moment. It can signify change. And ultimately, design helps form equals function, right? So function is utility, emotions, ideals, things that have meaning for humans. And meaning helps us determine value. So design is a method of translating ideas into value for others. So let's talk about experience design. Think about this, right? Everything around you right now is designed by someone, everything. People were paid to translate ideas into real value so someone else. How well these translations meet your needs is based on your experience and your expectations, not just the opinion of the designers or the people that hire them. For any customer of any business. So, more math. Experience equals value offered minus expectations and needs over time. Again, experience equals products, service, and solutions minus customers' contacts and interactions over time. So why is this important? Experience equals what happens over time. So, a practical example, right? Is the glass half full or half empty? How about now? So again, maybe one's half empty, the other one's half full. If you look at it a moment in time, it doesn't make any sense. If you look at it in context, you probably have an opinion about which it is. So what happens over time affects how we interpret the present. Your business and your customers don't exist as points in time, they exist over time. So what happens over time, a customer or user has multiple interactions with a brand, product, or service. I have to click the right number of times, and it's usually a guess to figure out what's going to be right and what's going to go too far. So if those interactions are positive, you get an engaged customer, right? Multiple negative ones will create an apathetic or worse one. Thinking about how customers interact with an organization over a thing over a bunch of time is how we think about this and how we try and do it, right? So you need more than a great product. You need to make design decisions for any product or service, and they need to be considered in context of the overall experience the customer has with the business. Experience design is this perspective that any and all design is part of a larger system of experiences. So in our work, what we're trying to do is not just do point bits of design, but think about these larger design systems that are a series of experiences together. So the end goal, right, is ongoing engagement with consumers. So more math. Experience equals product, service, solutions. Again, customer context and interactions over time. So well-crafted based on understanding of customer context, right? Time and context as customer journey, right? To keep people engaged. And then the whole thing wraps up kind of in brand. You should also note that I use Comic Sans here in case you're taking me too seriously. So why does any of this matter? One point is the cost of acquiring a new customer is always higher than retaining an existing customer. And yet, the ratio of the global spend on marketing to retention is about 50-1. So that's maybe a little backwards. And I think this kind of argument is a point for getting your customers to think about retention, not just acquisition. You know, spend more time in designing good things, spend less time on marketing. So if you're a business and you don't understand this, those that do will eat your lunch. So that's enough kind of about the theory. I want to get into some specifics around one client. So we've been working with McDonald's for about 3.5 years. We were hired by their chief digital officer. It's the first one they've ever had. And he hired us to help with brand relevance, introduce faster design and development methodologies into the organization, work with him on global strategy, and roll out new platforms. A little context, they serve 68 million people every single day in over 100 countries. So I've been doing this kind of work almost 25 years. I've never worked with an organization like them. They're just unique, and their challenges and the things they try to accomplish are just at a scale that's a little hard to get one's head around. So I want to talk about how we work with them. You know, when we're thinking about experience design, we want to start with strategy. Like, what are we trying to accomplish? We want strategy work done so we can be agile, nimble, and iterative. To do that, you need to decide what you're trying to accomplish beforehand, and that's strategy. So for them, some of the things we started with were experience principles. The principles for what all McDonald's experiences should be like, right? So here are a couple examples, right? Frictionless food fast, right? It kind of is in their name. They're about convenience, right? It needs to be fast. It needs to be frictionless. This idea of knowing you better, right? As they serve 68 million people every day, but they don't normally know who those people are. So helping them get a user authenticated, helping them get a user recognized, helps them serve them better, helps them market to them better, helps them reward loyalty, those kinds of things. they're selling food, so we need to celebrate food, and some of that comes in photography, some of that comes in presentation, some of that just comes in the work we do in design systems. Serve up surprise and delight. We look for little ways of making, whether it's an app or a kiosk or a menu board, something that people are going to have just a small moment of excitement about. It's not about a big game, it's not about something complicated, it's just some moment of like, isn't that novel? And this idea of global consistency and local flavor. So they're in over 100 countries. That means that menus vary, the people vary, the restaurants vary to some degree. Other things are consistent, like the Big Mac is always the Big Mac. So we've had to create interfaces and platforms and design guidelines and tools that reflect that, right? So a local market has to be able to replace content based on what they do and what they serve, and yet stay true to the overall system. On the other hand, we've gotten them to standardize on things like silly things like type and photography, just to, frankly, it lowers their costs. And we need to deliver value. Everything we do in service to the customer needs to be about value, because it's McDonald's. So strategy is doing a bunch of different things for them, right? We've got customer experience here, but ultimately, what value will the experience deliver for the business? This is an important question. How does the experience evolve over time? How does the experience meet the customer needs? And how do we make it happen? How do we actually do this? How do we build these things? How do we launch these things? If we don't have answers to all these things, then at the end of the day, the strategy has probably failed. So a couple tools we've used in doing that. We do service blueprinting and customer journey work. Customer journey work tends to represent the customer's experience, whereas the service blueprint represents the business. By putting them together, you get both sides of the experience, and you know that someone walking into a restaurant, we know what they're doing. You also know what the person behind the counter is doing. You know what they're seeing on their POS screen, right? And together, we can make things actually that launch. Customer cards are just a simple thing we do to help build empathy for the users within the business itself, right? Because in some businesses, people get pretty far away from their actual users. By bringing them closer, it just helps them make good decisions. The service blueprinting and the customer journeys are, they're not fixed things. It's not something you do once and refer back to. It's a tool. So, the point of the Post-its is like we're changing this all the time, and we're moving things around, and we're updating it, because these are not, again, they're not static, and it's important to think of them that way. A big challenge with an organization like McDonald's is figuring out roadmap, particularly around their development. So they've got multiple versions of their platform. They usually are running 3 or 4 different versions of it, 4, 4x, 5, 5x at the same time. So as we do design work and make decisions around features and functions we want to roll out, we have to think about how those work for those different platforms and which features we're going to concentrate on. So a lot of our work ends up being, and you can see this in here, I think, a little bit, we do a lot of weighting of different work to figure out level of effort and when we want to roll it out, because we have limited resources and limited time. So there's a lot of effort to keep engineering, design, business, restaurant operations all sort of lined up together. We do a fair amount of work with potential partnerships. So what does it mean for McDonald's to sit in another company's product and vice versa? So if you're ordering McDonald's with Uber, what's that look like from a branding perspective, from an experience perspective? What APIs allow or not allow? And then ultimately probably what deal are Uber and McDonald's willing to make together? And I can't overstate the sort of the challenge of McDonald's being international. We do most of this work out of New York. We do some in London as well. But the United States is not Europe. It's not China, Southeast Asia, or South America. And as designers sitting in the U.S. who have maybe grown up with McDonald's, we have a very U.S.-centric sort of understanding of the business. We do a lot of research to try and get our heads out of our own thinking and get into the customers. So some of that's through insights work. And insights are about learning about the market. It's also about convincing the organization that the strategy work we've done it makes sense. You know, that the assertions we're making are correct, right? So we live in a mobile-first world. I think everybody knows that, right? Multi-device usage is the norm, also pretty obvious. This idea of omni-channel experience as a baseline is easy to say. It's hard to do. Yep, too many slides. I'll go back one. So, how does McDonald's deliver on the baseline today? So, I think from a restaurant experience and from a menu perspective, they've done a good job of being consistent across the globe. Right? I think people can probably see that. The digital experience is highly fragmented, and it's been a challenge. Capabilities, access across different channels are totally inconsistent. When we started with them, they actually had over 100 apps in just the iOS App Store alone. I don't remember how many they had in Android. We got it down to this number, and we're still trying to get it down. So what's tomorrow's experience look like? So serve the customer where they are with what they need in the manner in which they wish to experience McDonald's, make things consistent and coherent across things like email, online advertising, integrate promotions, web experience, things like in-restaurant Wi-Fi. We have this idea of smart components that are UI elements that can be used across different platforms. New kiosk experience as well as the mobile app. Third-party ordering, that's this integration with other brands. Search results. We've been working hard to put customer need ahead of business, right? Which is tough in big organizations. You know, we've got this idea of this overall customer experience around like they need something, you know, they want to eat, they order, they wait, they receive it, they eat again, they eat it, they digest, and trying to look within that and think about the different experiences in there and where we need to focus. You know, we've tried to create consistency of form and function and work on handoff moments, right? So some of that's about design and UI, and some of that's really about underlying platforms to allow handoff between different interfaces and pieces of infrastructure. You know, we talk about consistency, but I think coherence is maybe better because we're talking about different mediums. You know, a kiosk is not a mobile app, is not an in-store menu board. So sure, you want consistency, but really you want coherence so they hold together and people understand them together. And again, what's the long view for the customer relationship? This idea of getting more customers to authenticate so that they can speak to the customer and know who the customer is better. So a little bit about how we use research. We do a lot of upfront formative research, which is about improving customers and improving customer experiences and understanding the consumer's sort of needs and desires. We do it to understand what's in the marketplace and looking at things like current restaurant experience. We do more summative research to look at things like how we did, validating our work, looking for problems. We prototype everything we possibly can. And prototypes run the gamut from fully baked prototypes that are wired into their live systems. So we could order a McDonald's meal from within our offices and have it delivered in a store. To simpler ones like paper prototypes, simple motion ones, something as simple as like this little emotion and motion one where we're just trying to get it like, what do different shapes feel like? How can we add a little motion to make it feel different? What are small things we can do? You to this point about understanding the consumer, we do a lot of testing for usability. Again, we're a bunch of designers from wherever we're from. We can't speak for how the whole world will experience something, so we validate however we can. This is sort of a simple process we have for doing repeat usability. We do this sometimes monthly, sometimes every 2 months. It kind of depends on the pacing. We do it all in person. We tend to do about 14 participants. Recruiting, writing the protocol, and prototype development are a couple weeks. We do 2 days of usability sessions, and we do synthesis for 2 to 5 days, and those go back to our product teams and to the customer. We use like a really simple setup that we repeat. We've got 2 rooms. We've got observers in one. When the clients first started doing this work with us, they always wanted to sit in on the usability. Over time, I think they got bored, and now they mostly don't. So mostly it's just us, one of us with a customer. They've got a mobile device usually, or whatever thing they're on. We're observing them. I may have a little video of it. I'm not sure the sound is very exciting, but. So you see we have a little camera that sits on top of the screen and just lets us capture what's going on. We can also pipe that to the other room in case anyone wants to watch. And we do this sort of guided storytelling approach towards research. There's also a fair amount of sort of hardcore and metrics at scale that goes on, but most of that happens on the client side. So, in a nutshell, we've worked with them to establish strategy, gather insights to prove our case, do research to prove it. We continue to prioritize efforts across the organization, and then we design systems and applications. And ultimately, we test for usability. I'll admit that working with them is not always as fast as we would like. We've actually been working about 3.5 years, and we've only started rolling things out really recently. So if you download the mobile app today, you'll download our work. Unfortunately, it's maybe 25% of the functionality we've all worked on, but it takes a while to get things out. We've got new kiosks rolling out, although which markets roll them out when is always a bit of a crapshoot. Talk about something totally different now. This is a much smaller project. It's called Vivi. I'm going to start with a little movie.
As an anaesthetist, what I would do during a long surgical case is obviously keep the patient asleep, but also you're trying to keep the patient stable. And that means I need to have continuous awareness of their blood pressure, the oxygen level within their bloodstream, and a number of other parameters which are vital for the sustenance of life, if you like.
So we developed a head-mounted display which puts that data in the clinician's field of view so they can direct more attention towards the patient and less attention trying to see conventional monitor screens.
When things start to go a little bit wrong, say the patient bleeds rather a lot during the surgery and the blood pressure drops, then my job is to notice that immediately, not after a long delay, and treat it quickly.
The thing that we were briefed on was to build an app for a platform like Google Glass. There's a long list of reasons why these don't necessarily solve the problem. Our approach is to begin with the user, not an engineering specification. So when you follow that path, you can end up in a very different place. Vivi is not a pair of glasses. It's a very different kind of product that solves a real problem for real people.
I mean, there's so many challenges, like the optics needed to be designed, what information is important at what time, then how do you configure the product when you've scrubbed up, even getting data from a conventional patient monitor was a big challenge.
So really what we wanted to do was start from the ground up. We took pieces of Lego and started building with them, creating very, very simple prototypes, and really it was that sort of learning and thinking through building that was really important to what we were doing.
We designed the app, we designed the GUI on the device, we did the industrial design, we did the engineering, we did the gateway device that interfaces with the patient monitor.
We wanted to make sure that the physical device felt comfortable with the application that we were building, and by working on all of the parts concurrently, actually we were able to do that really successfully.
Together, Method and Global Logic offer an end-to-end experience design and development service. Vivi leveraged all of this capability to deliver a solution that truly integrates everything in a single approach. The fact is, we didn't just talk about it, we built it.
Going through the process of naming, we came across Vivi, which is Latin for life, and it felt like it was a really great fit for both the product and what it was doing.
We thought we were onto something useful. It just needed that extra step to be taken.
What we achieved with the project is a high fidelity prototype. Really what it needs now is clinical testing and more rigorous in-theatre action.
You can't get a better opportunity than creating a product that's going to help save people's lives. And that's all about a real-world, practical problem that matters to human beings when they need it most.
All right, let me talk a little bit about how we did it. So, as they said, anesthesiologists, nurses and paramedics keep patients stable during surgery and hospital transfers, right? And this is often a little challenging. And they've always used monitors, right, to observe vital parameters, heart rate, expired CO2, oxygen saturation. And the operating theater is often chaotic, and so they have to balance their attention between clinical status and signs, monitor screens, colleague activity, right? So there's a lot they have to pay attention to. And many anesthesiologists have very heavy workloads, right, and difficult conditions. So them spotting problems quickly is life or death, and sometimes their attention's a little not what it should be. So we've tried to put vital sign data constantly in view, allowing them to multitask better, and to help with their situational awareness. So how does it work? We've left all the patient monitoring systems the way they always have been. They have vital sign probes, and they've got a bunch of sort of legacy equipment they've always had. We built a gateway, which connects wirelessly to the headset, right? So pretty straightforward. When they first came to us, they thought they wanted to do something with Google Glass, but the problem with Google Glass, besides the fact that it's a really broad platform, you have to touch it a lot. You have to constantly be poking at it. We wanted to avoid that. We wanted to avoid something where you have to shout commands to it. We wanted to avoid all that kind of sort of messing around. For one, it has real trouble where you're trying to stay sterile. Two, it's just a distraction, right? So simple, focused interface was the way we were trying to do things. So it requires configuration, but the goal is that you configure it before the surgery. You configure it before you're sterile, and use an app to do that. And it has a couple different modes. There's sort of some life sign ones. There are some ones around like core things like respiration, and there's some stability metrics. And again, you can choose what you want, and you can customize them. And then there's a little simulation mode, so you can see how it's going to work before you enter the surgery. We built it with this like high contrast, monochromatic OLED display. It's very small, super high contrast, easy to read, very low power. It can go days, if not weeks, without a charge, which just means that you don't have to worry about running out of battery in the middle of a surgery, which again is problematic. We use this small Bauernfeld prism, which has exceptionally good clarity and a good focal area, so it's very hard for it to go out of focus, right? So again, less risk of you having to mess with it mid-surgery. It's kind of a simulation. The black spot is because of the way we capture this picture, that wouldn't be in the real thing, but the idea is that it is superimposed here over your field of vision. And we use this small, really stable ball joint, so there's a lot of adjustability to it, and you can get it just right, and then it stays put. It's pretty simple. Of course, sometimes you want to get it out of the way. So why not use third-party hardware? I think we've answered some of that already. There's a lot out there, but these are complicated, expensive platforms, right? They do all sorts of things. They're more like Swiss Army knives, right? We thought that this opportunity required a scalpel, really a focused, really single-purpose device. So the results are this prototype that's small, lighter, cheaper, and longer battery life than the competitive products. I think that we understood the context of the user better, and were better able to build something that they'd use, right? So how did we develop it? We start with user research, normal things, talking to anesthesiologists, observing the surgeries, looking when it goes wrong. We did our share of book research on what's been written about surgery. We did a lot of practical prototyping to build this up and test and iterate and see how it was going to work. And that started with really off-the-shelf components, sort of maker, hobbyist kind of electronics. It was an easy way of just getting going. We started with Lego, right? The team was a small hybrid team, right? So industrial design, IXD and visual design, engineering, all worked together in a small team, sort of lean approach. It made us able to move quickly and fairly efficiently. This is a startup that didn't have big budgets, so there was a lot to be said for just moving fast. We built all we did all the engineering work. We were trying to go for compact, low energy, low cost, efficient, easy to assemble. Currently, it's on a couple different boards. I think with time, it'll go to one board, just as a cost reduction. We did some sort of HCI and human factors research, and found there's a lot of there's a good body of research there on how to build these kinds of interfaces, how to build these kinds of tools, and it added on to sort of what we already knew and what we learned from our own research. And so we made a lot of prototypes out of prototypes. Again, we started with Lego, we went to 3D printed things. We used initially off-the-shelf components and eventually developed our own components. So this took about 8 months, and a pretty small team. So I guess the question around is what next? We developed this one scalpel, right, for this one industry, but I think there are a lot of other areas where heads-up displays make sense, right, but a focused one does. From everything from warehouse workers to scuba divers, people doing all sorts of exercise. A lot of what's out there on the market right now are these general purpose products, and I'm just not sure that they end up serving anyone well. Instead, they serve nobody well. So, again, there's room for lots of different scalpels. So, remember, experience design is the perspective that any and all design is part of a larger system of experiences, and design decisions for products or services should be considered in context of an overall experience. And we see the sort of end goal for these systems of experience being ongoing engagement. I think engagement can also be a metric for things like satisfaction, value, et cetera, right? If people stay engaged, they probably see value. Thanks.
Thank you, David. So
I kept right on time. Look at that.
Yeah, it's
I
perfect.
did exactly what you asked me to. I didn't think I was going to.
We have 10 minutes for questions, and I hope you're going to have some. So raise your hands.
You could disagree too. That'd be fine.
Thanks, David. I'm over here in the corner.
Hi.
So I'm not exactly sure how to word this, but a question on the McDonald's experience. I'm just curious on what kind of conversations you and your client are having around more and more automation. And basically at McDonald's, I think we can all see a McDonald's in the future, and I think they may already have one. It's basically a big vending machine where there's very, very little human contact going on within it. And this is happening in lots of restaurants and service industries. What do you have any conversations around how this affects the overall experience, positively, negatively, and any kind of like social implications, conversations around that?
Well, so it's good. You've cued me for an anecdote that I was going to tell and forgot about, so thank you. We ran a bunch of users through the line, right, at McDonald's, and asked them about their experience, what it felt like, how long it took, et cetera. You know, there's a story which is like the worst place in line is to be the person right before you have to order is the worst moment, because people have anxiety, they don't know what they want, they haven't made a decision, they tend to order what the person in front of them ordered or what they ordered the last time, right? There's a whole, and in some McDonald's there's a lot of just chaos around like, where do I stand? So they've had kiosks for years. They were first developed in France. They've got them in other countries as well, not so much in the US. We've developed a new kiosk. So we've walked people through the kiosk and asked them, how did it feel? How long did it take? Same questions. And they were like, I was more relaxed, it felt better, it was faster, a couple things. So it usually takes them longer, so they're wrong about how long it takes. They order from a broader range of products, so they order deeper into the menu, and things like upsell work better. I'll get to the other part of your question around the social impact in a moment. So the point is that customer experience is super contextual and very much about like confidence in a process and comfort in a process. And the kiosk satisfies those needs better than the line does. And as a result, people's perception of how long it takes is that it's faster. So perception of time versus actual time is a really important thing because they've always been like a process optimization organization. This process takes 28 seconds, let's get it down to 20 seconds. We've saved 8 seconds, that's a value to everyone. But as it turns out, that's not valuable to the consumer. I think with regards to the question of like a future without people in restaurants, I've never heard anyone there talk about it that way. I've never heard anyone there speculate around. I mean, there's lots of stuff in the press about McDonald's and like trying to lower labor costs, and I've actually never heard that from anyone at McDonald's, and that's never been part of the conversation. Well, maybe. I don't actually think that's how they're motivated mostly. Of course, some of the franchisees owners, want that. It certainly is a potential impact of it. If you look at the delivery market in New York City, like for food delivery, how many people do you know just don't call anymore, right? They use Seamless, they use Caviar. They will not call a restaurant to order food. They will only use an app, right? So people want that. So socially, I'm not sure where they're going with it, to be honest. But there is certainly, we are going that direction. Did I answer your question? Oh, all right. Anyone else? Over here. Over here?
That was me, sorry. Hello. My question is around the VV monitor. And it's actually broader around doing stuff for healthcare and doing especially stuff for like the actual operating theater. Because when you talk to people about like startups and doing products and you mention healthcare, everyone's like, oh my God, like don't do healthcare because it's so highly regulated and like it's going to be horrible. So like my first part of the question is like what was your experience with regulation and like designing for a highly regulated environment? And also around like, because you're not a specialized healthcare design firm, like what was the reasoning that why wouldn't the startup approach someone who's maybe, I don't know, like is there such a thing?
Right, so, I mean, I think design is about constraints, and I think all the interesting stuff is hard. So, if we want simple and easy, we would do campaign work, So I don't think we're generally not intimidated by the hard thing, right? It's doing things with impact takes effort, right? Healthcare is kind of a pain. Big organizations are kind of a pain, right? I think that's true of both. This one, You know, the regulatory stuff wasn't as bad as it could have been. In this case, we have the advantage that I said we were acquired by this company, Global Logic. They have a really big team, mostly in the Ukraine, although some in Poland as well, that have a lot of medical experience and do a lot of medical devices. They're making pacemakers and they're making other things. So they already are pretty deep and have all the certifications for that stuff. So some people ask us like why we sold the company, and I think this is a good example of why we'd sell the company, because we had this deep expertise now that we didn't have before, and that helped a lot.
All right. We have another question.
Okay, my question is about prototyping. How much effort do you put into prototyping? Because, for example, it's really fun for me, and I have sometimes tendencies to make it too long, because it's fun.
Yeah.
So the question is...
as much as we have time and budget for. I mean, that's the real question, the answer. Maybe I went over it quickly, but with McDonald's, again, we have kiosks in our studio that are connected to their live point of sale system, right? So that's it's a prototype, but it's basically the real thing. We've got ones where we've done it on paper. We've got ones, where you build it out of foam. So I don't have a good answer about what's the right level. I think it sometimes does get dictated by your client and just how much time and money they're going to give you. And sometimes it's dictated by the need and what we're trying to figure out. So if we don't need to do something complicated, we won't. And the best projects, I mean, one of the advantages of working with, like Vivi, right? So it's a startup. Budgets are super tight. And so we had to have a very small group of people fulfilling lots of different roles. McDonald's is a little bit easier and more generous. We can have a broader group team. We have design technologists who are somewhere in between back-end and front-end coders and designers and are doing prototypes pretty much full-time. So I guess I'd say it's a balancing act. I don't know if that helps.
Thank you. Okay, if we don't have any more questions, I do have one. And I'm pretty curious, as MCE is a conference where the world of engineering and design mixes, and you actually did kind of the same thing. You got together with Global Logic, and I'm very curious, how did that, what changed? Was that like a big and important step for method? Is your process totally different right now? Are you collaborating on everyday basis? And how is that? Or you maybe did that only because of the world that is changing?
So let's see. Why do we do it? There's lots of reasons. Like we've been running an agency a long time and we were tired. Probably no one minds getting the money. We want capabilities, right? They can do embedded code, they can do front-end code, they have scale. They gave us access to clients we didn't used to have access to. Some projects are highly collaborative. Vivi is an example. We have other clients where we're doing sort of digital transformation projects where we lead strategy and they lead development and execution and sort of implementation, and some of these are multi-year relationships. Those are fantastic. We couldn't do this by ourselves before.
So would you say you love that symbiosis?
A lot of it's really, the first couple of years were at times rough. Getting integrated into their accounting systems and using Oracle for timesheets and expenses and stuff just sucks. Yeah. There's a bunch of stupid stuff that's a pain. But the flip side is we can do things we couldn't do before, and lots of those are great. We've got projects now that we could have never done before. I think there's also simply, we've always been a product and service-oriented design firm. We've always wanted to be strategic. If you do strategy but you can't implement anything, you're kind of full of shit. Yeah. And if you just do products that are ultimately represented by guidelines and keynote presentations, again, like, is your stuff real or not? Now, some clients have their own development, have their own teams, and we work with them. But others need the whole thing. So I think in balance, it's a good thing. It's a positive thing. It took a couple of years to be that. And I'll add, when I speak to, I don't know, I was talking with a gentleman here from Fjord. I know of the friends there. When they were first acquired by Accenture, it was kind of rough. But now everyone I talked to there was really happy with it and really happy with the relationship. So it just takes a little time and work and caring, you know.
Cool. Thanks a lot.
Thanks everybody.